The air in the cavernous auction hall was thick with the scent of floor wax and history. Nora Vincent pulled her cardigan tighter, weaving through rows of mahogany bureaus and piles of moth-eaten textiles. As a professional archivist, she had learned that the most important stories were rarely the ones sitting on the auction block. They were the ones buried in the discarded boxes beneath it. She crouched near a stack of leather-bound ledgers that smelled of damp attics. Tucked between a tarnished silver tea set and a stack of correspondence was a small, heavy frame. It was a Victorian photograph, the silver emulsion fading into sepia ghostliness. It depicted two girls in stiff, lace-collared white dresses. They stood on a rug, one slightly older, clutching the hand of a smaller girl with such ferocity that her knuckles appeared white even in the grainy light. Something about the younger girl's expression, a vacant, glassy stare, and the unnatural, locked posture of her limbs sent a shiver down Nora's spine. It was a heavy, visceral reaction. She didn't hesitate. For £12, the auctioneer handed over the slice of the past. Nora felt a strange, lingering pull as she tucked it into her satchel. That evening, Nora's apartment was bathed in the cool blue light of her monitor. She gingerly removed the photograph from its frame, mounted it, and began the slow, meticulous process of a high-resolution scan. With every filter application, the image became unsettlingly clear. The older girl's face was sharp, her eyes focused on something just beyond the frame. But the younger girl, the one Nora had first noticed, was transformed by the clarity. Her eyes were wide, fixed in a stare that seemed to look right through the camera lens. Her hand, gripped by the older girl, hung at a hinge-like weird angle. Nora sat back, the breath hitching in her throat. She had spent years cataloging Victorian objects. She knew the telltale signs of post-mortem photography, where grieving families posed their deceased children one last time to capture a semblance of life. Sleep had been elusive, interrupted by dreams of glass eyes and lace. By sunrise, Nora was back at her desk, her computer screen filled with side-by-side comparisons of the image and known historical examples of Victorian memorial photography. The younger girl checked almost every box. The unnatural stillness, the wide, unblinking eyes, the way the clothing was draped to hide the support stands. Nora began drafting her catalog entry, her fingers flying across the keys. Subject appears to be a post-mortem commission. She stopped, her cursor blinking rhythmically against the white screen. Something nagged at her. She zoomed in on the older girl's face. It wasn't the portrait of mourning she had expected. There was no grief, no solemnity, not even the practiced melancholy required of such portraits. Instead, there was a flash of mild, relatable impatience, a crinkle in the brow, the slight shift of a weight-bearing hip. If the girl were alive, why did she look so very dead? The back of the frame yielded a faded stamp. Aldous Pembridge and Associates, Harley Row, 1895. Nora spent hours navigating digital archives of London businesses until she located the surviving business ledgers of the Pembridge studio. Her hands trembled slightly as she scrolled through the scanned pages, finally landing on the Calloway entry. The photographer's notes were precise, almost clinical. Both girls present and cooperative. Younger subject required 3 attempts due to movement. Nora exhaled, the sound loud in the quiet room. The younger girl had been alive. She read on, expecting a name to settle the matter, but her eyes snagged on the final lines of the entry. The older girl was recorded clearly, Margaret, aged 8. But the younger girl? She was listed only as second subject. No name, no age. Nora flipped through the rest of the ledger, scanning every other entry for that year. Every other client was identified by full name, parentage, and address. The younger girl was a ghost in the records, a singular unnamed void in the heart of a prominent Victorian family. Nora pushed her software to its limit, zooming in on the younger girl's throat. There, half hidden beneath the lace collar, was a tiny reflective object. She pushed the contrast, watching as a gold-toned locket materialized. It was engraved with a single elegant letter, E. She frantically cross-referenced the Calloway family records. Only one daughter was listed, Margaret, born in 1887. There was no mention of a second child. No birth certificate, no baptismal record, no name beginning with E. Nora returned to the photographer's ledger, noticing a column she had overlooked, Instrument. For this specific entry, it didn't list a camera lens or a backdrop. It read, Locket, EMH, held for claim. It wasn't just jewelry. It was a marker. Someone had deliberately placed it around the girl's neck, a silent insurance policy meant to be captured in the portrait. It was a beacon of identity. Digging through parish records and fragmented employment logs from the Calloway estate, the narrative slowly knit itself together. The younger girl was Eleanor Mary Holt, born in 1889. Her mother, Clara, had been a seamstress for the Calloways, a woman who had lived in the periphery of their grand lives. Clara had died just a year after Eleanor's birth, leaving the child entirely untethered. But Eleanor hadn't been sent to an orphanage. She had been absorbed into the Calloway household, hidden in plain sight. Parish records were silent, but legal scraps suggested the truth. Edward Calloway, the patriarch, was her father. The realization hit Nora with the weight of a physical blow. Edward hadn't abandoned his illegitimate daughter. He had brought her into his home, a living secret tucked behind the velvet curtains of the upper class. He gave her a roof, but he could not give her his name. He had forced her into this life of anonymity, shielding her from a scandal that would have destroyed his reputation and perhaps in that era sealed her fate to the streets. The portrait was his way of acknowledging her without ever speaking her name aloud. Nora found the draft of Edward Calloway's 1918 will buried in an obscure legal repository. It was a manifesto of late-stage regret. In the document, Edward explicitly recognized Eleanor as his natural daughter, granting her an equal share of the estate. He had died in 1921, fully believing he had secured her future. He had been wrong. The papers that followed his death were a masterclass in calculated erasure. Within weeks, Edward's wife Frances and Margaret's husband had moved with ruthless efficiency. They didn't just contest the will, they systematically dismantled the evidence of Eleanor's existence. Using the family solicitor, they struck the paternity clause, claiming it referred to a non-existent entity. Eleanor was married off within the year to a man named Ellison, a convenient arrangement to move her out of the house and into obscurity. The Calloway doors clicked shut, locking Eleanor out of her own inheritance and her own history. Nora read the legal filings, the cold, clinical language of the lawyers attempting to legislate a human being out of existence. It was systematic, heartless, and entirely successful. Until now, she realized it had been the final word. Nora didn't stop at the ledger. She spent a week submerged in dusty labyrinthine archives which still held the Calloway case files from 1921. Her fingers stained gray with soot, she sifted through legal filings, internal memos, and finally a cache of private correspondence that had never seen the inside of a courtroom. The solicitor who had suppressed Edward's will was George Hartley. Buried deep in the archives, Nora found the original legal objection, a document arguing that the paternity clause was void because it referred to a non-existent entity. The language was cold, precise, and entirely fraudulent. The firm had known exactly who Eleanor was. 3 generations later, the current Hartley was in charge. When Douglas Peel had come to claim the estate 8 months ago, Hartley had discovered Edward's original will and seen Eleanor's name, yet the estate still passed to Peel. Nora needed answers. Nora stood in the mahogany-paneled office of the Hartley firm and laid the photograph, the ledger entry, and the birth record on the desk. Hartley stared at the evidence before quietly opening a drawer. Without resisting, he handed her Edward's original will and a note identifying Eleanor's only living descendant, Ruth Ellison, 74, of Bristol. Nora felt the final pieces of the mystery fall into place. She finally had the person she had been searching for. Hartley admitted that when Peel claimed the estate, he had warned him about Eleanor's legal claim. Peel dismissed it and ordered the firm to suppress the will. When Hartley objected, Peel threatened his career and forced the transfer through. Unable to destroy the evidence, Hartley secretly hid the original will along with a handwritten note pointing to a sealed letter from Frances Calloway naming Eleanor's descendants. His hidden files were less about legal caution than years of guilt waiting for someone brave enough to uncover them. The letter to Ruth Ellison was the hardest Nora had ever written. She introduced herself as an archivist researching a Victorian photograph and explained that she believed it showed one of Ruth's ancestors. 2 days later, Ruth called. She immediately recognized the photograph, explaining that her mother had owned a copy and believed it was the only proof her grandmother had ever existed. They spoke at length, sharing family details. Ruth cared little about inheritance. She wanted to know about Eleanor and whether she had ever been loved. When they met, Nora spread out the will letters and evidence of the firm's deception. Ruth listened silently, holding the gold locket. Looking at the photograph, she whispered that Eleanor's own father had tried to acknowledge her, only for others to erase her existence. Nora had no comforting answer, but she realized the attempt had ultimately failed. The estate had been lost, yet Eleanor's identity had survived through the photograph and the locket. She was no longer an unnamed figure. She was Eleanor. The legal process moved quickly once the original 1918 will was presented. With Hartley's cooperation and the newly uncovered evidence, the court formally recognized Eleanor as Edward Calloway's daughter. The estate itself could not be recovered, but the historical record was finally corrected. Eleanor Mary Holt was officially restored to the Calloway family lineage. Douglas Peel's conduct was referred for review, and local historical records were amended. The judgment marked the end of generations of deception. Eleanor was no longer a forgotten secret, but a recognized daughter whose place in history had finally been restored. Nora carefully placed a photograph in the ledger entry into the online collection of the Victorian Lives archive. Beneath the frame, she pinned a small card: Margaret Calloway, aged 8. Eleanor Mary Holt, aged 6. Harley Row, London, 1895. A week later, a package arrived at her office from Bristol. Inside was a black and white photo from the 1960s. It showed a woman in her 70s sitting in a sun-drenched garden, smiling with a quiet, fierce grace. Around her neck, the gold locket caught the light. On the back, in delicate, familiar handwriting, was the note: Eleanor, aged 74. She always wore it. Nora pinned the photo above her desk right next to the Victorian original. The two images spanned an entire life, bridged by a small piece of gold and the sheer stubborn will to exist. Eleanor had been nameless in the ledger, struck from the will and pushed out of the world without ceremony. But she had lived. She had worn her father's acknowledgement against her chest for 74 years, waiting for someone to finally read the truth she had carried all along. The story was finally complete.